Just want to.
Oh, there we go. There it is.
Got to make sure. I've done too many of these, and I'm always just like,
You know what to look for.
There we go. Perfect.
Welcome everybody to the first Prog Round Table episode. I'd like to thank everybody for dropping by, and tonight we're going to make a kind of a compilation of a mixtape or a mix CD, depending how old you are. I've done both, and I thought it'd be a good topic for this first episode, and I think we'll go in the order of Nathan, Ian, Michael, and then myself, because that's kind of the way I can keep track of who's going. So without further ado, Nathan, what's your first choice?
All right. So yeah, this was a bit challenging, and I have like a lot here to choose from. I just, as I was trying to filter my list, I was trying to think of choices that were a bit like maybe not the obvious choices, but still good, shorter, somewhat accessible tracks. So I tried not to put any big major like massive prog epics and things. So going down my list, I think I have a track of 16 here to pick from. I split it into half old school classic prog and half newer prog. But I'll start off with I have South Side of the Sky from Yes as one of my first picks here on my list. I knew I had to have Yes on the list, and it was just a matter of which one. I didn't want to really go the route of Roundabout because I thought that's a bit too of the obvious pick maybe. So I thought South Side of the Sky is a good representation of their sound. It's a bit shorter compared to a lot of their bigger prog epics, but it really goes through a lot of different elements of their sound. There's, some heavier parts, but then some lighter, more atmospheric, John Anderson led stuff in the middle. And I just really think it's a good representation of the genre and a fairly accessible track, considering some of their works in those first few albums.
Yeah, I would even agree that's a little bit of an unknown track too. It's not as well known. So I think that's a really great choice.
Yeah, 100% agreed. As I say, I think anything you like, if you're going to choose Yes, as long as you just go Owner of a Lonely Heart, then I think you're going to be golden in terms of introducing people to, the actual prog Yes, rather than whatever that album was.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Great choice.
Yeah. What's your first choice, Ian?
Ooh, my first choice. Well, I wanted to give something a little bit sort of immediacy to it. And I kind of thought back to myself, like, how did I get into the genre in the first place? So I'll be honest with you, my list is more on the metal side than it is on the sort of classic side or anything like that. But it's not entirely it's not just bands that have formed within the last 10 years, although quite a lot of them are, I'm not going to lie. But I figured I'd kick things off with a pretty, identifiable classic from a band which I've loved for so long, and it's a Dream Theater track. And it's not Pull Me Under, baby. Hell no. No, that's too easy. It's too obvious. It's literally, it will be the safe choice. But I've gone with The Mirror off of Awake.
Oh,
because
nice.
It's that immediate sort of it grabs you straight away. And I think it's a really attention-grabbing song. It's got so many good riffs in it. James just sounds absolute dynamite on this. And even though it's kind of got that sort of 90s sheen in its production values, and it sounds a bit tinny by today's standards, admittedly, I think it's a really great introduction to progressive metal, to be honest. It's certainly one of the first things that grabbed me when I started getting into things. I mean, literally the first Dream Theater song I ever heard, admittedly, was A Change of Seasons, but that's a bit too long-winded to really introduce somebody to the genre with. But I think The Mirror really sets a great balance between being heavy and accessible and really indicative of what you can do with progressive metal. So that's why it's the one I kick things off with.
That's an interesting pick. I had Metropolis on my major list, and I didn't pick it in the end, but good pick.
Yeah, that's a great, that's my one of my, well, it's hard to pick a favorite from Awake, but
right,
in terms of immediacy, that grabbed right from the beginning. So
yeah, if I was going to go with my favorite
pick
off of Awake, I'd have just gone with Scarred, but I don't think that's a great one to introduce people with. But
it's true. It's true. Oh boy.
All right, Mr. Notes.
All right. So I approach this as I approach most of my mixtapes and mix CDs. That's one of my major hobbies, especially when I was a youth. So I wanted to go for what I consider one of the best openings of any prog piece to introduce somebody to progressive rock. So I decided, and this is kind of like a 1-2 punch. A lot of the tracks that I have on my list are one song but split up into multiple pieces because Spotify likes the revenue. So the opening track on this one is Constant Bloom from Moon Safari. I think it opens up any kind of mixtape perfectly, and it's a perfect grabber right from the beginning as an a cappella piece. I think it showcases how prog can use harmonies very, very well, and yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites. So I had to open it up with Constant Bloom, and then we'll get to it later on, but I always figure that Constant Bloom and Methuselah's Children are technically one track, but split across two things. So I put, because I love, these kinds of things in mixtapes. Constant Bloom is at the very beginning. Methuselah's Children is right near the end, just to kind of have that symmetry of, hey, this is what prog's all about. We introduce a theme at the beginning and we revisit it and finalize it at the end.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
that's what
Yeah,
I've
like
got
that a
for
lot.
my first.
Pieces.
Yeah, that's what I've got.
It's a great track. I mean, I love Moon Safari. The thing is, though, is you say most people to Moon Safari, they'll think of the album by Air, obviously,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Every time. Every
Yeah,
time.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that song. And they just go, sexy boy. That's a banger of a tune, don't get me wrong.
It's great, but yeah, it's not really prog. And I also like it because it introduces a newer wave of prog, and to kind of showcase, hey, prog didn't die in the 70s. We've got a lot of prog
Definitely.
here and now. So
Yeah, I really like Moon Safari too. I really heavily considered them for my list. I do a show with my wife where I introduce her to prog music, so that was something I utilized to think about these picks. And she always says her favorite modern prog band we've listened to is Moon Safari. So I think a great choice for introduction for beginners for sure.
Definitely.
Well, I think they're one of those bands that is always consistently on the cruise to the edge too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even
Life's
rumors
Goal.
that they've got new music coming out, I've heard.
Better do.
We've been
waiting
hearing
1,000 years
this
for Himmler back in Volume 2. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
guys, where is it?
10 years later.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's waiting for the new Tool album.
That's true.
At least that
we
actually
got-
happened, though.
I was going to say, at least the Tool album came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first choice was, I was kind of thinking along the lines of a concept album where you can take a song completely out of the story and lyrically it makes no sense. But Genesis being my favorite band, I've picked the Carpet Crawlers. And it's such a beautiful song. Anybody can sing along with it. You can play it for anybody and it wouldn't offend anybody. It's just perfection to the T. I don't think there's a better song on that album.
Yeah, that's tricky. It's a great way to get people in because it's so soothing, it's so melodic. It's Tony Banks at his best in terms of emoting a theme and emoting an emotion. It's a great way to get people into Genesis. Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, if you're going to pick something off Lamb Lies Down, then that's probably about the best you could pick off of it. It's certainly in terms of introducing people to the genre. So that is a really, really good pick.
Yeah, definitely agree. It's one of my favorite albums from the genre. It was hard on the list. I tried to stay a little bit away from concept albums because I thought it was hard to pull out a song from it and have it make sense. But I think if any would work, that's probably a good pick for that, for sure.
Perfect. All right, Nathan, it's your number 2.
All right. So one of the prog bands that really I grew up with, it's one of my dad's favorite bands that I felt like I had to pick something from, is Gentle Giant. One of my favorite prog bands of all time. And I picked Just the Same from the Freehand album. I thought that's a pretty good introduction to them. It's, has those cool finger snaps at the beginning and then gets into a pretty fun groove. And it's a really fun track. And any of those first 3 tracks from Freehand I considered, but I really thought this was just a fun introduction to showcase the band and shows them pretty much firing on all cylinders, and just really a fun, infectious track that I thought would be fun to put on my list.
Yeah, it's been covered quite a bit too, because I think Jordan Rudess covered it on his Going Home.
Shoot, he totally did, didn't he? Yeah. He did a whole bunch of stuff on that, didn't he?
It's a great introduction to Gentle Giant, especially with Gentle Giant being so like crazy and off the wall and very unaccessible, just the same as a very accessible, in contrast to all their other stuff.
Yeah, well, like you say, mate, the idea of Gentle Giant as a band, they're kind of a bit sort of out there in that respect. So that is a really, really good choice insofar as that it's definitely one of the more accessible things. And if people like it, then maybe they'll get into the rest of Gentle Giant. And as far as I'm concerned, that's no bad thing. It's a really good band to sort of like cut your teeth on in terms of like eccentricity and what have you. So
Yeah.
Perfect. Good choice, Nathan. And Ian, your number.
Okay, number 2. We've gone a little bit Dutch this time round. We are packing in some Ayreon. Love a bit of Ayreon. Like literally, Arjen Lucassen is one of my favorite musicians of all time. And with the possible exception of Transitus, I would say that every single Ayreon record is excellent, which made me sad that I didn't like Transitus, but that's another video entirely. We've gone with, God, what is it? It's 01011001 or Planet Y to make it easier to say. And we've gone with Ride the Comet, a nice, snappy, punchy, accessible, nice, short 3.5-minute length, so it's not overwhelming. But it's got this great, catchy hook. It's got these brilliant guitars. It's just such a fun, just really accessible, like, just bright and love it. It's not too heavy. It's not too dense. It's not too, like, convoluted or complex like a lot of Ayreon can get at times. It's just a fun metal song. And I think you could put this on to any sort of person who's into things like Metallica, or like Lamb of God, or just extra, and any sort of general sort of metal. And I think they still probably have a really good time with this, and it might sort of open up the doors, as it were, to seeing what prog metal can actually do. So for that reason, I really had to just slap it on there, even though picking an Ayreon song out of context, considering everything's a really heavy concept album, was a bit challenging. I considered something off of the Human Equation at this point. I was thinking like maybe Day 16 Loser, because obviously it's got Heavy Debbie doing that ridiculous vocal line on it, which is so freaking cool. I love it. But I figured something a bit more accessible like Ride the Comet would be a bit more appropriate at this point. So yeah, that's my logic.
Yeah, Ride the Comet was how I got my brother into Ayreon.
Nice.
Because I played it for him and he loves like the 80s metal stuff. And I'm like, well, if you want some good cock rock, we've got it right here on right here on Ride the Comet.
Excellent.
Yeah. And in fact, I think they're doing the whole thing live.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
Yeah. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah, such a great album. That was the album that got me into Ayreon. Even though I heard Love and Loser from the Human Equation first, but I didn't put together that was Ayreon.
I was in my Dream Theater stage at that time, and I heard that James Abreu was singing on this other album, and I just listened to it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And because he's got so many different vocalists on it, that's another reason why I think Ayreon's a great gateway drug, is because there's so many different vocalists, and then you can branch off, if you like those vocals, into the other bands and just go from there, which is pretty much what I did, I'll be honest with you.
That's how I found out about Michael Mills. So
yeah, same.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great track. That's kind of an underrated album to me. I really love that. It's one of his best. My introduction was into Electric Castle, so that was one I discovered early on that just I was blown away by. One of the early prog albums, at least of the more modern era, that I heard, and I just fell in love with it immediately. I love all his stuff. It's incredible. But yeah, great track.
Yes, great pick. All right, Mike, you're number 2.
All right, number 2. So I went very, very conventional. And again, part of it was like, okay, so if Constant Bloom is my first one, what's a good song that goes into that? And yeah, I went very mainstream with this one. I went Roundabout from Yes. We've already talked about it. It's I think outside of Owner of a Lonely Heart, Yes is biggest track, because I wanted something accessible, something from Yes that people would immediately like grab to. Even though Yes is one of my all-time favorites, I wouldn't start somebody off with like Close to the Edge or Tales of Topographic Oceans or Relayered or any of the ones that I love. So it was either this one or I've Seen All Good People that I was kind of going back and forth with, but I think Roundabout does a better job at introducing the concepts of progressive rock. So yeah, that's the one I picked.
Yeah, it's a good choice.
It's a really good pick. I think as well, considering a lot like internet culture a lot these days as well, people will latch onto it and be like, oh, it's that one bit from that one meme. And they'll be like,
Yeah.
aha, there's a whole other
Yeah.
song to it. My goodness.
Yeah, there's a whole, and it was also featured on School of Rock as well.
Oh, was it? I've seen that
Yeah,
in years.
because Jack Black gives the keyboardist a CD
Oh,
of
awesome.
Fragile and says, "Learn from Rick Wakeman. He is the god."
Nice. And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. So yeah.
Excellent. Good choice. My number 2 is going to be totally based on atmosphere. And this is probably the hardest one I picked, but I narrowed it down to Witch Hunt by Rush. You listen
That's
to
a
that
deep
song
cut.
quite loud
That
late
is.
at night. It really conjures up a little bit of a dredge feeling, but it's, and the way it's recorded, it's a very complex song. Doesn't sound like it, but it is very complex.
Yeah, it's one of those sneaky songs where, listening to it without really thinking about it, you're like, okay, yeah, it's a darker atmospheric kind of a tone. But the more you listen to it, you're like, wow, there's a lot going on
You
here.
pick
that
up a
I
lot
didn't-
of, what time signature is that? Because that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great choice. A deeper cut too, because
Yeah.
Definitely.
is that from 2112 or is that from
Moving Pictures.
Moving Pictures?
Yeah.
So like you've got like Tom Sawyer and YYZ,
Limelight.
Limelight,
Red Barchetta, baby.
yeah, a lot of like really prominent
Yeah.
Rush tracks. So to get a deep cut, that's great.
It's an unusual choice, but it's a really, really good one, I think, as well, because it would be so easy just to go with Tom Sawyer, obviously, because it's the song everybody knows.
I didn't want to do that. And Vital Signs is another one up there that was kind of pick me for the same reasons.
No, that's a great choice. I think that's a really, really good pick.
Excellent.
Great job.
Thank you. All right, Nathan, you're number 3.
All right. So moving into something a bit more modern, I want to make sure to get some modern choices too. I put on a Porcupine Tree. The Sound of Muzak was the choice I thought of. Yeah, because part of what made me think of it, I knew I had to have something representing Porcupine Tree or Stephen Wilson. And I just went to see Porcupine Tree with my dad, and I was trying to tell him what albums to listen to and stuff because he'd never heard of Porcupine Tree. And so In Absentia was one of the albums I told him he should listen to. And this was the track that stood out to him as like, oh, this is an incredible band. I love this track. This was like the best thing I heard. So I thought, okay, that's good introduction. Then that's a good track to hook someone into the band. It's beautiful. It has some great vocal harmonies and just has an incredible chorus that just is super memorable, and I just sticks in my head. And it's just one of my favorite tracks from one of my favorite prog albums. I just really love that one, and I feel like it has a bit of an accessibility to it that would work for a new listener too. So I think that's a good one for here for this list.
Yeah, a little bit jealous. How was that concert?
Right.
Incredible. Yeah, it was
Imagine.
amazing. One of
I
my
had the opportunity
best
the
concerts
other
I've been
week,
to.
but
Yeah.
it was like 150 quid for a ticket, and I had to get down to London, and I was like,
I was gonna say, the sticker price scared me away, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go, but my dad surprised me with tickets for like my birthday.
Amazing.
So
Awesome.
it was a big surprise. Yeah, it was fun.
That's a really good pick as well, to be honest, as well. I think pretty much anything off In Absentia is a really good start, especially for Porcupine Tree, because there's so much variety and depth to everything that they've done. I mean, if you compare something like Voyage 34 to Dead Wings, like, is this even the same band? We have no idea. But to go off with a cut like that, I think is a really, really good shout. I mean, I've got a Porcupine Tree song later on in my list, but it's not that one. So. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. Like, it's not necessarily my favorite from the band, and I know I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe it's just like the time signature rubs me the wrong way with like the actual picking on it, but I do think that it provides like a really good introduction to some of the techniques of progressive rock, of like, hey, you can have these off the wall, very strange choruses and verses and have it work. So
Yeah.
Perfect. Ian, your next pick.
Ooh, we are on to number 3. Yes, we are indeed. And we're going quite contemporary with this one. We're going for quite a relatively recent band. We're going to Australia. We're going down under today. And we're going to go with Caligula's Horse. And we are going to go with the lead single off of, I can't remember which number album it was, off of In Contact. We're going to go with Will's song, Let the Colors Run. Now, I absolutely love Caligula's Horse. I will admit their latest release didn't grab me as much as I was really hoping it would do, despite the gorgeous cover art. It's just like the most beautiful cover art I've ever seen. But In Contact for me was one of the best records they've done so far. And I really feel that this lead single off of it, it's so punchy, it's so aggressive. It's got these great staccato riffs, this incredible vocal section in it following off from like the bridge. And it's just such a great showcase of these crazy guitars, great keyboards, and Jim Gray's vocals on this. Oh my God. He is like an absolute treasure, which I think Australia should be extremely proud of, like amongst many other bands that Australia are responsible for. Like progressive metal and Australia go together like honey and like freaking wine or whatever. It's like, oh my God, this is so good. There is something in the water in Australia which keeps producing great progressive metal bands. Like there's something in the Scandinavian waters which keeps producing great, like, you know, death metal bands and stuff like that. But I think as far as cuts go from Caligula's Horse, this is going to be one of the best songs you can cut your teeth on. It's not my favorite song by them by any stretch of the imagination. That's Into the White off of the Tide, the Thief in the River, or whatever it's called, I think. Great song. But I think that Will's song, Let the Colors Run, is such a fantastic introduction to the band and really just opens up the discography for me.
Yeah, I love Caligula's Horse, and I feel like they're a little bit underrepresented a little bit in, you know, the prog metal scene specifically. But I mean, I really enjoyed their last album of Rise Radiant. I'm still waiting for a follow-up for that. But I mean, I was introduced with In Contact, and how could you get better than that?
It's so good. Is it what the last track? I can't remember what it's called now. Is it Graves or? Yeah, Graves. Oh my God.
Yeah, Graves.
It's like the penultimate track is so incredible. It's like their big 50-minute epic, and it's just unbelievable. But it's not a great starting point, obviously. So
no,
which is why we've gone for Will's song. Yeah, it's why we've gone for Will's song because it's a nice digestible sort of 4.5 minute kind of deal. So yeah, we've gone with that.
That's great.
Great choice.
Yep.
Mike.
All right. So this is my first of, like, I consider it one track, but they split it into two. And I'm going to a concept record because I had to, and it was one of the tracks that got me into Dream Theater. And so trying to narrow down a Dream Theater track to introduce somebody to like prog metal, because I wanted to have like the whole spectrum of different progressive rock tracks. So I went with Scene 2 from Scenes from Memory. And I consider Scene 2 one track. So we've got Overture 1928 and Scene 2, Part 2, Strange Deja Vu. I consider them one track. They're all Scene 2. And I think it does a great job of really like capturing all the different facets of Dream Theater. You've got the really noodly aspect of it, you have the really brutal aspect of it, but you also have that very commanding and very soothing and very like ballady aspect as well. And that's part of the reason why I decided to put this one on rather than say like The Spirit Carries On or Home, which really focuses in on a single aspect rather than playing with all. And I didn't want to put Dance of Eternity on there because I didn't want to scare anybody away. So that's why I figure these two tracks that make up one song, I think, is a really good introduction. And it's what introduced me to Dream Theater, because it was this one and Panic Attack that got me into Dream Theater. Those two tracks, that's what got me into it. And then I did a deep dive into their material. So
that's really an excellent choice. So if we're like packing Overture 1928 and Strange Deja Vu into the one package, that it's such a good introduction to that record. I mean, obviously you got like Regression at the start of it, which is sort of but then obviously when you get into the actual music proper, and it's oh my God, it's just unbelievable. I have such a special place in my heart for Metropolis Part 2. It is such an affecting record for me that the idea of not having it within like up here is just horrifying to me. Like if I didn't have Metropolis Part 2 in my musical lexicon, I would be so upset. So I think that's a really wonderful choice because it's such a great representation of the band. It's so good.
Go for it, Nathan.
Oh, sorry. It is my entry point too, so I appreciate the pick as well. I actually heard my first Dream Theater song I heard was The Glass Prison, which at the time was a bit too heavy for me. Like I wasn't into the metal, so I'm like, oh, this band isn't for me. But I heard so many people rave about Metropolis Part 2. I'm like, well, I got to give them another shot. and then I was just like blown away. That's one of my all-time top 5 favorite albums. So
Yeah.
definitely a great entry point.
Yeah.
Well, that's
and
a
I remember
great pick.
Mhm.
I don't mean to be booing against Dream Theater, but I don't understand why that album is so praised. I like it, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather listen to 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence or
That's
That's
fair. That is
you
fair.
know, I get why it's praised. I don't.
Mhm.
I think for me, Metropolis Part 2 is one of those records where it really just came to me at a particular point in
And
my
that's
life where it's what I
probably
needed.
why,
Yeah.
because my introduction to Dream Theater was Images and Words.
Fair,
That's
yeah.
right where I started with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably had a
Right,
big
yeah.
thing to do with it.
6 Degrees is an
Yeah.
absolutely bomb record, though. It's so
I
good.
was,
Yeah.
For
I was
sure.
gonna say, I wish Travis was here because that's one of
Oh,
his
yeah.
all-time favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
So he would sing the praises. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a future topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
think
not a
so.
bad idea,
Like,
actually. I could talk about Dream Theater till the cows come home, honestly.
Yeah.
They're in my veins, you know, I can't get rid of them.
yeah.
All right. My third pick is going back to the second rebirth of prog in the mid 80s with a group called IQ and their song The Darkest Hour from Ever.
Nice.
Great
A
track.
great
Yeah.
song. It's one of those epics, but it's not, 20 minutes long. It's a concise 10 minutes. Tells a great story. Yeah. Yeah, and just an absolute perfect song.
Yeah, such a great, and that album overall is such a great one. Like, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, mine too.
So good.
I'm still pretty new to IQ in terms of like how long I've listened to them for. Like, obviously I listened to Resistance from a couple of years back, and obviously the Road of Bones before that. I absolutely love the Road of Bones. I think it's so amazing. Like, such a good record. I've only listened to Ever like a couple of times, but I think that's a really, really good pick off of the record. I think that's probably the best choice you could have made from that. But apart from that, as I say, I'm still relatively inexperienced with IQ, but that is still a very, very good show.
Yeah, the two that got me into IQ was Dark Matter and Subterranea. And Dark Matter is probably still my favorite of theirs, even though I will recognize that maybe not is their best album. Like, all the tracks on there slap, but yeah, Ever was the one that really was like, yeah, I think this is something special in the neo-prog sphere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right, Nathan, your last and final pick.
All right. So maybe this is a bit I just really love this song, whether it's a great introduction or not, we'll see, but because it's a bit of a longer song and it goes through a lot of stuff, but I wanted to pick Frost on my list, and I picked Blacklight Machine from Million Town, which is just one of my all-time favorite tracks. It's like 10 minutes long, and it just takes you on such a ride through so many different movements and moments. I love the instrumental bit at the end that just is fire. Just all the instrumental interplay, the guitar and the keyboards, and Jim Godfrey is just incredible on there. John Mitchell, just a really great song. But I feel like Frost has a little bit of an accessibility to them in some ways, like a bit of that pop sensibility to like the vocals and to some of their approaches to the music, to the production values. And so I think it works as an introduction as well, but maybe a selfish pick just because it's one of my favorite songs ever. So I really wanted to put that in here.
That's a great choice.
Anything from Frost is going to be a good pick for me, especially something off Million Town, which is again one of my the albums that affected me so much, especially that title track. My God.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, anything from that, which introduces people to it and gets them then to listen to the entire record, they're gonna have such a fun time with that album because it's so good.
Yeah,
I couldn't go wrong, and like, I was debating putting Frost on here, and I didn't know if I wanted to go with Million Town or Experiments in Mass Appeal, because both of those albums for me show two very different sides of the band. But yeah, I think Blacklight Machine was probably like my favorite from those two records.
Yeah, I just felt it was a good representation because it ushers in to me like a new era of prog and like brings in some more modern sensibilities to that classic prog sound. So I felt like that was a good thing to represent in a prog list like this.
Absolutely.
All right, Ian.
Hello. Right, we come to number 4. Now, I really debated over this, like trying to figure which is the one which needs to still get some exposure. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've crafted the most perfect list of all perfect lists ever, and eternally great. So I'm trying to like trim everything away and just leave one. But I had to go really with my heart on this one. And we've gone for a Beardfish track this time. We've gone for a little bit of that beautiful Beardfish action. And I've gone for the song that introduced me to the band, and I will ever love it forever in all its beautiful silliness with South of the Border. It's such a fun song. Like, if I was to ever ask, like, if somebody ever asked me what is the most fun you can have with progressive rock, I'd point at South of the Border. It's got this so ridiculous. The story is so ridiculous. The vocals are so hammy. Just everything about it. It's just ruinously entertaining. I cannot describe it enough. If you put this song on and don't leave with a big stupid smile on your face about how goofy it is, then I don't know, maybe Prog for you at that point. I don't know. But it really just opened me up to the band, and I'm so grateful that it did, because they got such a great and varied discography. Like, the entire thing is so good. But just South of the Border, I don't know if I could think of any other better song to really sort of, especially if they've got a playful sense of humor, then 100% it's a great pick for me, and it's got to be why it's on this list.
It always reminds me of the Chicken Farmer song from the Flower Kings.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Good call.
Oh,
Good call.
Yeah, that's such a great track. And that whole Sleeping in Traffic Part 2 is just a masterpiece. So trying to pick any track from that album is really difficult. But yeah, I just have way too much fun with that track. I played it for my dad, and he's like, yeah, this is what like Frank Zappa would be writing if he wanted to be a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I guess that's true.
All right, Mr. Notes, what's your 4th pick?
My 4th pick, I went more traditional with this one. Again, I wanted to get the full scope. So I went with, again, another track that got me into progressive rock as a whole. And that is the title track from the Emerson, Lake and Palmer album, Trilogy.
Nice.
This, I understand why they never really played it live, because of how many backtracks they needed in order to fully realize it in a live setting. But this covers all the different facets of progressive rock that I love. You know, it starts off very somber, very intimate, and then it just explodes into this like synth explosion. I love the playing styles. Everybody's playing at top notch on this track, and I think this is a great way to kind of bait and switch people into progressive rock as well. Like, they'll listen to it, it's like, oh, this is very soothing, very inviting, very accessible track. And then out of nowhere, all these synths and Keith Emerson, he's like, okay, hold my beer. I'm going to just so I think people with this will either fall in love with prog, or will be like, well, let's hold on a little bit, and it will that's why I figured I had to have a track like this on here.
No, for sure. I mean, ELP you can't go too far wrong with. Like, I mean, obviously my favorite ELP is probably, I don't know, Brain Salad Surgery or Tarkus or something like that. But I think like choosing the title track of Tarkus might be a bit much, but it's so good. But I like what we say, this is all about getting people into the genre, and I reckon if you get people started on that, then if they like it, then we'll baby steps and find out the delightful glory that is the armadillo battle tank of Tarkus.
Right, that's right.
It's like my favorite. It's one of my favorite album covers ever. It's just like, what is this? Great. It's an armadillo with guns and tire tracks, obviously.
How prog is that?
Yeah, exactly, right? It just feels like it represents the genre.
Unreal. My last pick, I'm going to go a little bit kind of an art rock in a group called Gazpacho. And their song Soyuz One from the album Soyuz. Maybe not the best song there's to sing, but you get that stupid drum beat at the beginning of that, and in Soyuz One will be stuck in my head, no lie, for weeks at a time. And that to me is just brilliant. Like, if they're able to do that to my brain, and obviously other people's brains, I'm looking at you, Ian. That's something special.
I wonder why. Maybe it's because I slightly overreacted when you said Gazpacho. Great. Great band.
Beautiful.
Absolutely love them. So
Such
incredible.
an underrated band.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Night
mhm.
for me is probably my favorite
Oh.
pick in terms of like their albums. Like
Yeah.
just Massive Illusion. Oh my God.
Oh,
It's
makes me weep.
so affecting. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. And then you've got like oh God, what's it called? One with Mumbly Joe. I can't even bloody. I love Gazpacho so much. I know all of their albums off by heart. He said lies whilst he completely forgets the name of the damn album that he likes the most. I'll get it
TikTok.
here. Where is it? It's not TikTok. No.
Demon?
God.
I'm just gonna start
Yes,
listing.
Demon. That's the
Demon.
There we
one
go.
with the
I
Wizard
was
of
like, I'm just
Altai
gonna start
Mountain.
listing Gazpacho
Yeah.
albums.
Like the Wizard of Altai Mountain is such a great track. Like I considered sticking that on there, but then I thought maybe it's a little bit too eclectic to introduce people with. But God, I freaking love Gazpacho so much. A friend of mine really switched me onto them. He said, "Hey, listen tonight, you'll love this." And I was like, "Oh no, yes, he's right, I do. This is amazing." And I just sort of deep dove from there. Great band, and I think that Soyuz Part One is a really, really good way to introduce people to that band as well. I think that's a really great pick.
Yeah, same. Like I have a Gazpacho track much further down on my list. And yeah, trying to figure out like the best in point. Like I got one of my friends to really love TikTok through Winter Is Never. And they'll just listen to that track. And they're like, well, the rest of the album's a little weird, but at least I love Winter Is Never. I'm like, well, I'll take that.
You're weird.
Right? Oh boy. Yeah.
Awesome. So do you guys want to just go around and give some honorable mentions?
Yeah, I think that's a
A little
great
bit of
idea,
a
actually.
description and
Sure, yeah.
right. Okay, Nathan, what do you got?
All right. So, one of the things I wanted to mention, I'm a big fan of Neil Morse and Spock's Beard and all of that stuff. That's really on any prog list, I'd be including that. But I was trying to stick within the confines of what's on Spotify. And a lot of the classic Spock's Beard and transatlantic stuff isn't there. So that was a little bit tough for me, but I did try to squeeze on Walking on the Wind from Spock's Beard. I found a live version from like a newer incarnation of the band, but really it's a placeholder for the classic Walking on the Wind from Beware of Darkness album, which is one of my favorite tracks from the band. I think it's a good representation of their sound. It's not as big of an epic as some of their other bigger pieces, but it's still has that epic feel, but a bit of that accessibility in Neil's writing, and it just is one of my favorite tracks from that band. So I wanted to represent Neil somehow on the list. I feel like he's a great entry point for prog as well.
I wouldn't know where to start.
And unfortunately, because everything's behind the paywall of the Waterfall app, it's really hard to get into him unless you want to shell out money for it, which we're all willing to do.
I mean,
but the common the common listener that's like, well, I haven't heard this guy before and I don't know, so we only get the odd album here and there that is on streaming services. So it's such a hard buy-in.
It is, it's a real shame as well, because Neil Morse and just Spock's Beard in general is such a great band to get into. Like anything Neil puts his hand to, I absolutely love. And probably what's going to be next on my classic series that I'm looking at is going to be my literal favorite Neil Morse record of all time. And if I was to say, here's how to get into Neil Morse, I'd just throw a copy of this record at them and say, just listen to this on repeat until you can know every single note of it. That would be The Door. I cannot get enough of that. Sorry, Sola Scriptura. What the hell am I about? The Door.
Okay, I was going to say.
The Door's the first track. Again, Ian knows about progressive rock. He knows what the albums are called. He's so clever. Look at him, knowledge bursting out of his head. Because it's because I've not had my dinner yet.
That's such a heavy album for him too.
So heavy.
Yeah.
I remember getting into that when I was at university back in the day, and I used to have like this commute from my house to the office, and it was like an hour-long walk, or just over an hours-long walk through like the mean streets of Cardiff back in the day. And I just discovered this record, and I would just listen to it from start to finish, like on the way there and on the way back, and it was so affecting. It's such a huge record, but God, it's amazing. Like, I know it's a big ask to like say somebody, hey, you should introduce yourself to Neil Morse with this, but I think it's just such a complete record from start to finish that I just can't think of anything better to introduce people to him with.
Yeah,
great pick. Yeah,
definitely.
Yes, Neil Morse's famous album, The Door. Yes, I can't find this record called The Door. What do you speak of? Sola Scriptura. Come on, Ian. You know you're progressive rock. Come on.
Yeah, there's a lot of other honorable mentions. I don't know if we're going through like a bunch of them or just one at a time.
Pick a couple.
Just pick a couple.
Yeah.
I just to mention a few, I put Can Utility and the Coastliners from Genesis on my list. I always felt like that's a great shorter song by them, but still really encapsulates what the band's all about. It has all like the 12-string guitars, but more, some great soloing and just a really great track. I also thought about Carnival 9 First Impression Part 2, I think is what it's called. I think that's a good, pulling that section out of that epic is a pretty good introduction track. I thought about Kansas, Miracles Out of Nowhere was on my list because I really like Kansas and I think they're a little bit underrated in Prague, and I think it'd be cool to have them on here. Some of my more modern tracks, my Dream Theater track I put on here was Under a Glass Moon from Images and Words. I thought was a cool introduction, maybe not one of the bigger tracks from the album, but still a really solid one.
Pick. It's a nice underrated one from like their biggest record. I think that's a really good pick.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, I also have I wanted to put Haken on the list. I bet there's probably some other Haken inclusions too. I thought I went through a whole bunch of different picks. I had Cockroach King on here at one point, but I kind of landed on Atlas Stone from The Mountain. I thought that's a good introduction. Just a really cool track. And I also have a Big Train, the Transit of Venus Across the Sun. It's a beautiful track that has a lot of good brass section from them and more of a ballad or lighter song, but it's just really beautiful. The Folklore album is probably my favorite. I go between that and the English Electric albums. It's just so close, but Folklore I think is a great introduction to them in a lot of ways. So the album,
There's some
so
really good
few
picks.
of my picks.
I'd be quite. I'm really looking forward. I look forward to listening to the entire playlist that you got. That's some really good cuts there. Really good cuts.
Raise your honorables, Ian.
Honorables. Okay. Well, it's been hard to narrow it down to which 4 I will pick now, because obviously all my honorables I love. But if I was to really want to talk about one particular track especially, and it's a bit of a, not really a deep cut, but it's an older track from Between the Buried and Me. Curiously, nothing off Colors, because I think to cut Colors into pieces is sacrosanct, and you should never do that. Colors is one from start to finish, never, ever, ever separated. But this is literally, now I've always thought to myself, the hardest question you can ever ask a music fan is, what is their favorite song of all time? Because it really depends. What mood are you in? What sort of vibe are you feeling at the time? Because what you like one day might not be the same you like the other day. But my first pick of my literal favorite song of all time is Selkie's The Endless Obsession by Between the Buried and Me. And fun story about this song, it is the first and so far only time I have ever cried at a live gig. Not even Deep Peace by Devin Townsend could move me to those speaking openly in front of other people with for me. It is such a gamut of emotions. It's got this raw, chaotic, vile, angry energy, obviously, from Tommy Rogers, belting out these vocals, screaming and yelling, goddamn television, God, and all that sort of thing. He's a scary, scary man, but he's great. But then when you just segue into the sublime solo, that guitar solo from Paul Wagner is just unreal. I have heard nothing like it in my life. And to this day, as far as I'm concerned, is the greatest guitar solo ever written in a prog metal song, literally ever. And I think it might not necessarily be the best track to introduce people to BTBAM with, but I definitely think it's one of the strongest tracks you can lead off with. So I had to include it on that list somewhere.
I 100% endorse that. That was the song that got me into Between the Buried and Me.
Yes.
Because I was very hesitant on the brutal Cookie Monster style of singing. I had listened to a handful of the tracks before that, and I'm like, they're just too heavy. They're just too much for me. But then I went back and I listened to Alaska, and specifically that one in Medicine Wheel. And I always trip over the name.
Selkies.
Thank you. Selkies. It was the perfect song to get me into Between the Buried and Me, because if you can swallow that jagged pill of the first half of the track, the second half is so rewarding.
It really is. It's so good.
I think anybody that is hesitant about Between the Buried and Me because of the brutal and heaviness, I think if you listen to this track, you might be swayed.
Yeah, because like the first couple of records were very much metalcore, and just as that, and it was really with Alaska where they introduced all the progressive elements and really sort of came out of their shell. It's become the band that we kind of know them for now. They obviously really doubled down on that with like Colors and The Great Misdirect and everything that came after that. But Alaska and Selkies, oh my gosh, such a great stuff. Oh my god, just love it. But sort of like moving on from that as well, I've got a few other sort of like maybe slightly deeper cuts from other bands. We've got now, I don't know how to, for the life of me, I never know how to pronounce this, but I'm sure when I say it out loud, when I tell you it's from Pure Reason Revolution, and it's the Twin Sin / Trembling Willows. Now that's a pretty deep cut from the Dark Third. It's an incredible piece of music with these staccato like vocal lines, and it's just like, oh my god, it sounds so cool when you hear these vocal lines coming up, and it's such a cool song. I just love it so much. Other deep cuts, I've got obviously Haken. I had to get something from Haken on there. So I've got Paradolia Off of the Mountain, one of their bigger tracks. It's got this great wall of sound energy. And for me, it's really when the mandolin break kicks in that I was like, woo, you know, I was like, that is something going on right there.
Agreed.
That sounds cool as hell. I love that. And I suppose just really sort of top things off a bit. The song that I actually chose to finish my playlist with is one that I really would get out there, which is Flying Colors with The Storm.
Oh,
such a great debut record from such a great supergroup. Like so much about Flying Colors I love. It's such a playful, engaging, and entertaining little group. There are like so many great musicians involved on it. But The Storm, for me, it's so liberating sounding. It feels like the entire song has lifted a weight off of your shoulders from the opening moments to the very closing ones, and it is such a joy to listen to, and it just has to be something that I feel people really need to listen to. It's just so good.
Great
Agree more. Love it.
All right, Michael.
Oh boy. So choosing anything beyond those four was really difficult. But I at least wanted to mention a few of the ones that both helped me, but I think can help other individuals. The first one that I think really needs to have a spotlight is Fido with his track Formaldehyde from Doomsday Afternoon. Doomsday Afternoon literally changed my life. And Formaldehyde was the first track that I heard off of it from like, I think Prog Archives. If you want like contemporary cutting edge progressive rock of the day, like this sounds like it could have been written today very easily. And yet it was written over like 15 years ago. So I wanted to shine the light on that one. Of course, I have to have Haken on here, and that was super hard to narrow down of like, which one? But the more I spend with it, like I was like, oh, something from Aquarius, because that's my favorite album from them. But I also love Visions, and The Mountain is so good. In the end, in terms of a single track, I had to go with Puzzle Box from Vector, because I just there are a few songs that I listen to and I just think to myself, that's not fair. You cannot be this good. You know? It's like, you got to save some goodness for everybody else. And Puzzle Box was one of those. Again, in terms of like covering all the different facets, in terms of neo-prog, I think introducing somebody to all the different ideas and formulations of neo-prog, I want to go with Arena and their mid-90s album Immortal with the Butterfly Man. I love the soaring guitar work on that. I love the really dark messaging and storyline between it. I thought that was beautiful. I also wanted to put something that might not necessarily be prog, but I think has all the things that I love about prog. So I went with a single track across 3 different songs of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with their Polywan Gondoland album, starting with The Inner Cell, going into Loyalty, and then finally with Horology. The 3 tracks, I think, is the pinnacle of King Gizzard. And I think this is the perfect way to get into King Gizzard, even though every album from them is a different genre.
Do they have to be prog?
Oh,
they have to be prog, you know.
They're definitely prog adjacent, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
So I wanted to put something in there that was very like prog that is of the now, and I think King Gizzard is on the now. And then for the final two that I'll put, well, Judas Unrepresented from Big Big Train.
That was on my list as well.
Yeah, I had
I've got
to.
it there. Yeah.
Yeah, Ghost of Perdition from Opeth. You know, I gotta have some of that. Peel the
Such a
Paint
bop.
from Gentle Giant. You know, I have to. Comfort Zone from Beardfish. So
Great
hard
song.
to pick a Beardfish track,
That's a great
but
Yeah.
it's still my favorite. And then I ended everything off with the 3 Big Punch of Cinema Show from Genesis. I think it's a perfect song. Methuselah's Children from Moon Safari, which I talked about at the beginning. And then finally that end everything off, Starless from King Crimson.
Oh man.
I don't think
What a
there's
song.
been I don't think there's been a more proggy prog to have ever progged other than Starless from King Crimson.
I'm amazed
that song
nobody's
just-
mentioned them yet.
I was
Yeah.
tempted to put King Crimson on my list, but I figured at least somebody else would have done it. You
Yeah, I
know?
was thinking
But-
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was so hard to narrow down a single King Crimson track, but yeah, I think Starless is still the one that I would go to, because everything else is either too crazy or too off-putting for like the new listener. And I think Starless does the perfect balance of being accessible for people to come in with enough experimentation to keep things interesting. So, and I think those were all my
That's-
tracks. I know I kind of rapid fired all of the honorable mentions, but
Amazing.
Starless sends me places. It's so good. Like,
Yeah.
can't get over it sometimes. It's like, how is this made by people? This is just ridiculous. It's so good.
yeah, this is straight from the heavens. This can't
Yeah.
be made from
Yeah,
mortals.
yeah.
Oh boy.
All right. My last few were, I wanted to put something by Van der Graaf Generator on there, but that was a really hard one. I had Arrow down, but I thought that might be a little too much.
A little spicy.
Yeah. But my Haken choice was The Architect.
Architect, good choice.
Oh,
Yes, very good
the
choice.
dissonance in that song blows me away.
Mm,
There's so much happening all over the place. Tempos, this, that.
yeah,
That's a headphone
Mhm.
song, guys.
yeah.
Absolutely.
The Raven
Oh,
the Raven
Yeah.
refused to sing.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's going to be my last
Beautiful
song.
album.
Great pick.
Such a beautiful song.
Mm,
Another one was Songs from the Wood by Jethro Tull.
also excellent.
Mm,
Love
Just
that.
another great,
Beautiful.
happy feeling. You can put anybody in a bad mood, put that on, and it'll bring them right around. Just
Yep.
great summer
think-
song
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That's a really great
on
pick
my
as
list
well.
too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because like most of the times when you think of Jethro Tull, you'll obviously think like Aqualung or Thick as a Brick
Yeah.
or stuff like that. But I think that's a really
Yeah.
great cut, actually, to be honest. That's really, really good.
And I
Mhm.
wanted to put something off Pale Communion by Opeth, but I couldn't decide. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
The entire record is fine.
Yeah,
you know.
just throw it all.
If I could, I
Yeah.
would. And there was one more, but it was Eklund's May.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
I've not listened to them in a
such
long
a
time.
It is the
Good,
one
yeah.
song. I guess
Mm.
technically that fits, but it doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You reminded me I need to go back and listen to that band some more because it's been a hot minute since I listened to them, but they're really good.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of bands like that, you know. There's not enough hours in the day ever, is there? It's just like, okay, I'll just put on this 176-minute record, and no, I don't have time to listen to anything else. God damn it.
Yeah. That's the one point about prog rock. You need time,
Mhm.
Oh yeah, definitely.
which isn't always hard to find.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
let's do a little bit of promotion. What are you coming up on the
Ooh.
channel, Nathan?
Sure.
All right. So my channel is Nathan on Shuffle. I'm working on a Devin Townsend review. I know a lot of you have already weighed in on it, but I'm working my way through it. I'm kind of new to Devin Townsend, so it's a new
Me too.
experience for me. But I've been enjoying that record, so I should have a review out, I hope, this week on that one. I'm continuing my top 5 series. I do a countdown of top 5 every week on Tuesdays. I just did a top 5 Yes songs that I had a lot of fun with. So that series is going pretty well, and I still continue to do my reaction videos with my wife, where I'm sharing prog to her as she's the new prog beginner listener. So that's a lot of fun to do with her. We'll have one tomorrow. It maybe might feature Haken, as we've talked about. So that could be a fun one to check out. So that's what's coming up.
Nice. Ian.
Excellent. Hello, I'm better known on my own channel as a Rhyme Signatures, where I will introduce myself as a matter of pop culture and a silly reference to certain pop culture every single time. This is the only place you'll find out my real name. Spooky, mysterious, we love it. Mostly I just dabble in reviews of newer stuff that's coming out, but I have started doing a lot. Well, I've got 2 classic reviews out at the moment, but I've got a whole bunch of those that I've sort of like got halfway scripted for stuff like that. But in terms of newer music, I've been really digging the new Disillusion record. Avatarium's been rocking my socks off as well. What else have we got? Psychonaut from Belgium, wonderful band, really, really good. Also, we've got lovely Porcupine Tree bassist. His work with ORK and Screamnasium, that's been really, really good. Thoroughly been enjoying that record. What else have I got on my list? I've got a bunch of things here. Might get around to reviewing the new Evership record. I know that Mike's done that already. I'm not sure if my opinion's the same, but hey, that's half the fun.
I love that.
That is half the fun. We do like some differences in opinions. That's always, because it keeps things interesting. And I've discovered a new band recently called, I'll get the name entirely wrong, but they're called Vitskar Suden. And I was intrigued by this band. It's a record called The Faceless King, and it made me interested because one of the higher tier Bandcamp things comes with an entire 5e module, which I thought was amazing. I was like, oh, as a band and D&D put together, my 2 favorite things in the world. So I've sort of like been semi-listening to that recently. So there's going to be a whole bunch of new reviews coming out soon. It all really depends on how I get time to do them as well.
Yeah,
I've got quite a busy life outside the internet, but you know, I'm working on it. So if you want to hear my exciting and nuanced opinions on music, then by all means, you know, hit me up, and I'll try and keep you all entertained as best as I possibly can.
Excellent. Then what about you, Michael?
Well, I've got a new podcast out called The Metalhead. It's with myself and Gray Hayhurst, and it's a meditative podcast all about metal music. So we look at new reviews, news, and discussions about metal music. In terms of my own work, obviously notes, reviews. I'm going to continue my Friday reaction lists, where I'm trying to look at different lists that I find on the internet. And I've just, now that Devin Townsend is out, I think all the newer releases for this year are pretty much, like all the big ones at least, are done. So I'm going to work through my back catalog and look at some of the albums that I didn't get a chance to look at this year, like King's X or Queensryche, or some of these other like bigger projects that I just never got around to during the year. So that's going to keep me busy until at least the end of the year. So,
Yeah, Queensryche's a really great, strong album.
that's what I hear. Yeah, I'm very excited to dive into it.
Keep meaning to get around to that one as well. It's just trying to find the time.
That's it.
Yeah,
It's tough.
Yeah.
Adult life, man. Why is it so difficult? Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been doing some script work on Arena's new album and the new Devin album. And like Nathan, this is actually my first real introduction to him. And I'm picking up a lot of, this isn't his best work, but I have nothing to compare it to.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Devin's a really fascinating person to get into.
This is really
I'm
the
so
first
jealous.
time, that I've listened to his more, I don't want to use screaming vocals. And I don't mind
Strapping
them,
young lad
actually.
can be a bit
Like,
much.
I like his regular voice, and I don't know, does he use it much? There's certain albums where I want to avoid because I hate that cookie.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I would say,
like the yelling, I don't mind. The guy's got a great singing voice. Does he use it a lot?
his range is absurd. I would say anything post Ziltoid is probably a good shout in that respect, because obviously you had his early work with just where it's just under his solo name, and then he sort of like came back after a stint with Ziltoid the Omniscient, which for me is still one of my favorite records ever, and definitely one of my classics that's going to happen. But it's really when he started the Devin Townsend project, where he did these sort of 4 records in completely different styles. So you got his pop metal with Addicted, you got the angry chaos of Deconstruction, the really beautiful ephemeral Ghost, and this dark and sinister Key. And it's just every record was such a huge differential in style. But then Epic Loud came out sort of in the wake of all of those 4. And I would say personally, if I was going to say someone like cut their teeth on Devin Townsend, I would say, even though I don't think it's his best record, I think Epic Loud is probably the most accessible in terms of if you're not familiar with him, because he doesn't go too hard into things in terms of like the brutality of stuff like that. Like if somebody like listened to Strapping Young Lads City or Alien as their first, and they thought that was all that Devon was about. Yeah.
Don't.
No, yeah.
Knowing your
Strapping
taste in
is-
music.
Cut your hair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, the
yeah.
Sculler. Yeah. No, Strapping is very much once you know you're really into Devi, like, and you really want to just like cut back and figure out like, oh, this is what he was like when he was on drugs. And it's a bit it can be a bit intimidating to say the absolute least. I mean, I personally love Strapping Young Lad, but I've always had a bit of a penchant for the extreme side of music.
Yeah, the harder
But,
stuff.
he's a wonderful, wonderful person. His personality.
Well, like, that's the thing. Like
is wonderful.
every interview I see him in, he's the most gentleman. He's well spoken.
Yeah.
He's got a good sense of humor. So like, he's got to be one hell of an individual. Like, caring and smart. And,
yeah. I've seen him live about 6 or 7 times now as well. So
yeah, same. I would honestly recommend the best introduction for me for him would be the Retinal Circus, his live album, because he does a few tracks on there that he's screaming his balls off, but like for the most part, it's his clean singing that he focuses in on, because he can't maintain screaming throughout an entire set. So I think that one will give the biggest scope of an entry point for Devon, and it's his best live album. He's put out like a handful of live albums, so that would be my recommendation.
I got the special edition of that for Christmas one year, so I've got the Devon Townsend mask and everything like that. So
that's really cool. That's great.
Excellent. Well, I guess we should wrap it up. This has been really enjoyable.
It's been great.
Each of you individually, that it's been a good time, and I hope we do it again.
Oh, absolutely.
Fairly soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just hit me up. You know where to find me.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Have a great night. Take care of each other, and don't let the world get you down.
You too.
Wise words.
All right.
Right on. Good night.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.